Hello, welcome back to Wellness Wisdom. My name is Sharon Whitefawn, and I'm here today with my friend Regina Hill, and we are going to discuss diet culture. Regina is a mind-body coach, and she helps people, she guides them from diet culture to intuitive eating and ultimately self-coaching through body awareness work and other skills and talents that she has for her coaching business. So welcome, Regina.
Thanks, Sharon.
So good
Nice
to
to be
see you.
here.
Yeah, thank you so much for making time. And to let our audience know, you have done a couple, but the one I saw one of your workshops, and I was so like just blown away by the history that you brought about diet culture. As most people know, I've been in the health, fitness, and wellness industry for 30 plus, probably 40 years now, I guess, huh? I'm showing my age. For
Mm,
my whole life. Really, it's been my passion to be physically fit, mentally well, and spiritually whole and complete. So I work on all of that myself regularly, and that's what I teach. So hearing that history, though, that you brought to that
mm,
workshop and understanding, the origin or some of the origins, I guess, of how we as women and men, as a culture, have somewhat been conditioned, brainwashed, programmed, whatever word you would say. And so I want to hand it over to you to share all the cool stuff that you know about where it came from, how we got here,
okay.
buying all the pills and the gadgets and the fancy fads to lose weight, to look a certain way. And yet, understanding the origin, I think, is really helpful.
Yeah, when I first heard this information from one of my coaches, um, I was blown away because I had spent decades dieting. It started from a very young age, and I always felt like there was something wrong with me, that if I could just fix my body, if I could just look a certain way, um, then everything would open up. Life would be, all the fantasies that went along with that. Um, and so when I heard about the parallels of patriarchy, diet culture, and women's history, I was like, oh my God, I was, this young girl that was totally brainwashed and conditioned from a very young age to believe this certain way. And so it was um, the beginning of really doing the inner work that made a difference in my life and in myself.
That's
So
awesome.
yeah, so I'm excited to share it with others. And um, a lot of what I say is geared mostly to the female, just because that's my experience in life. Um, so, kind of excuse me for that. And maybe you can help me, include, a broader audience.
Yeah, for sure. Because it's true, women especially got the brunt of that, especially, when I started in the fitness industry anyway, long, long ago, there was a certain body type, and that's all you saw was this particular body type. And if you didn't fit that body type, then I don't know, it's true. I mean, I had body dysmorphia, right? I looked in the mirror, and even though I was thin and I was fit and I was healthy, more or less physically, I would say, when I looked in the mirror, that's not what I saw. I saw big, giant, fat thighs, and I just saw a big, fat blob. And it's not what was real, but it's just because we, at that time, many women put ourselves under these microscopes. And if we didn't look exactly like that image in that picture on that cover of that magazine, then you were less than. And men struggle with this too, people of
Absolutely.
all genders on the spectrum. So,
Hmm. Absolutely. We're all impacted by, the dominating society that gives us this information. Um, just maybe in different ways, but we're all impacted by it.
Yeah, exactly. There's the male physique too. Have to be buff and you have to have all these muscles. And, what about the guy that doesn't fit that mold, or the male,
Right, exactly.
whatever. And I know we're going to use the word feminine and masculine a lot, or male and female, but for our viewers and those listening, please understand when we say that, we might fail to mention every gender on the spectrum, but please understand that we acknowledge every gender on the spectrum, even if by accident we fail to say that exactly correctly,
Yes,
to not be offensive to anybody listening or watching. So I
yes,
know you
thank
have some
you.
really cool images and some stuff to tell us, and I want to dig in because I'm excited.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'll start with a definition of patriarchy, and the deeper I go into this, the better understanding I have that that word is kind of a trigger word, but maybe we can get into that a little later.
Sure.
So patriarchy is a social system in which men hold primary power, power in politics, roles in politics, leadership, social privilege, and dominate women. So, with that being said, I'll move on to, like I said, the parallels of patriarchy, diet culture, and women's history. So, starting in 1783 to 1888 was the abolition movement. And this is when women started becoming more vocal. A small percentage of women were being educated, and women were starting to seek the right to vote. So as women became more vocal and demanding, um, patriarchy responded by putting pressure on women's bodies to become smaller in a way of dominating.
Hmm.
Um, so if we go back and start looking at how that happened, we can start with in 1860, when film was out. There was an actress named Lillian Russell who was considered the feminine body ideal, and I have a picture of her. Um,
Hmm.
she and you can see that she, in today's standards, was a bit on the plump side.
Hmm. Voluptuous,
Um,
call her.
Voluptuous, yes. And so she was like the female ideal. And there was actually advertisements out for women to become plumper. So a lot of attention started being put on women's bodies, where um, before that the control was more with our ability to procreate.
Hmm.
So there was this kind of this shift into focus on women's bodies, and this is the time that this started. So there was, I've got, you may not be able to see this very well, but this is advertisement from a doctor for women to get plump. And and they'll show, there's one, this side shows the thin woman, the before, and this is the after. And so they had devices to help women plump up. So that was, I just found that interesting, that how far things went, from the other
Right.
side of where we are today.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Um,
So
so
was this
in
a
eight,
product they were selling? Sorry to interrupt. It's a product
yeah,
they were selling? Like, here, buy
well,
this to get
this,
plump, because plump is what's attractive to us men.
yes, well, this was a professor, William Famed, and he was helping women plump up with certain foods. And he was saying, don't use the devices anymore. You can do this with food. You can plump up with food. Um, so yeah, and he was saying, the thin woman, you don't have to hide in the bedroom with shame, to try to cover up your poor thin figure, from the gaze of her beloved spouse. So that's kind of funny,
Yeah.
but so then in 1869 is when the National Women's Suffrage Movement was founded. And the suffragettes were the group of women who fought for our right to vote. So patriarchy was getting very threatened at this point. Um, so in order to push back on that, there was well, here, let me show you. First, let me back up a little bit because in the suffrage movement, there was so much propaganda against it. So I'm just going to show a poster, just because I just feel like that's part of the importance of all this is understanding that the pushback from patriarchy was so strong. So the suffrage movement began, and here's just a propaganda poster of the caption says, "My wife joined the suffrage movement. I've been suffering ever since."
Mm,
And you can see that she's got him by the ear.
mm,
Um, so that
right.
was their way of pushing back, of course. And also another way was going back to the woman's ideal body. And there in 1910, well-known illustrator by the name of Dana Gibson. He was a male illustrator. He drew a picture of what's called the Gibson girl. And this was the new body ideal for women.
Mm,
And you can see the corset was worn, very thin waist. And at this time, it was heavily promoted in the new printing industry. Magazines, catalogs had come out, so it was heavily promoted. And this is also a time when products started coming on the market. Um, and also ready-made clothes. So clothes were made to fit the person, and then all of a sudden, the person had to fit into the ready-made clothes. So
wow.
this was all happening at this time as well. Um,
Like literally fitting
so
us into a model, into an image.
yes,
Literally fitting.
right.
Wow.
Hmm. So in 1920, the 19th Amendment was passed, giving women the right to vote, which of course threatened patriarchy. And so the next body ideal, feminine body ideal that came onto the scene was the flapper girl.
Mm,
And you can see, the dress was, loose fitting, um, getting away from the tight waist and the feminine curves. So women got rid of the corset,
the
but they started
restriction,
buying
to speak.
right. But they started binding themselves, binding their breasts, binding their butt, their thighs, their waist, or not their waist, but they started binding then, and so that the womanly shape
Huh.
was not shown. Um, and it was sold as thinness was sold as freedom.
Hmm.
So it was very sneaky, very insidious, and sneaky way of plugging that in.
Right.
This is also so the 1920s is also when diet culture was born. And diet culture is the cultural form of oppression on women's bodies. It's a subsystem of patriarchy or domination. And at this time, diet culture was born, and as was the weight loss industry. So 1932, diet pills came out on the market, and they actually had arsenic in them. Um,
Mm,
1948 was when diet groups, I think Weight Watchers was one of the first to come on the scene. And then in 1950s, it was bariatric surgery, which um, was marketed as a dieting, getting a smaller body,
wow.
producing a smaller body. So then get a fast forward to 1939 to 1945, and throughout this whole time women are still fighting for their rights, um, being more vocal politically. So 1939 to 1945 was World War II, and women were asked to go to the workforce, of course, because the men were off fighting the war. So women really got a taste of freedom, financial freedom. They were in a position where they no longer had to, listen to, what the man had to say, and go along with that. They were able to voice their opinion a little bit more. At that time, the beauty industry came into play. So, all the creams and anti-aging stuff started happening at that point. Um, and when women were asked to go back into, once the war was over and the men came back, and women were asked to go back into their homemaker role, um, a lot of women were, that was very difficult for them because they had gotten this taste of freedom.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so they, for the majority of women, of course, they felt there was no choice. They had to go back. Um, so fast forward to 1964 with the second wave of feminism. And what a woman named Betty Friedan was credited for that spark of the second wave of feminism. With She was a writer and an activist, and she conducted some interviews with women and created a book called The Feminine Mystique from those interviews. And it was really showing that women were unhappy, mainstream media, or I'm sorry, mainstream America. The women were no longer happy in that homemaker role, raising the children, in the marriage, staying at home. They wanted more. Um, they wanted more in politics. They wanted more, a higher education. They were just seeking more. They were finding that they they just wanted more from life.
Yeah.
So so that, and Betty Friedan was also the co-founder of NOW, National Organization for Women. So this was a time where women were really starting to come together and stir things up. Um, they were challenging gender roles and discrimination. They were asking for more rights in the workforce, equal pay, reproductive rights, and once again, the patriarchy pushed back and created the image of the first supermodel, who was Twiggy. And this isn't a great picture, but you can see Twiggy is very thin, and some believe it was an expression of keeping women small. Let's keep them small in all areas, their body, their minds, because they were getting too powerful.
Yeah, and here we are,
Um,
60 years later. I'm going to interrupt for just 1 minute, fighting for that same
yes,
thing,
yes,
right? Fighting for the almost the exact same things 60 years later
mm-hmm,
when Barbara
absolutely.
came out with her book.
Yes, very slow moving. I know, it's
And even
crazy.
backsliding some in today's
Yes,
world. Hello, to
yes,
about not having rights over our own body now reproductively, let alone fitting a particular image to look like this thin or this plump or whatever the heck the image is, but not even your most intimate uterus.
yeah,
So, wow. I'm sorry.
very
Had to
frightening.
highlight. Yeah.
No,
Here
yeah,
we are
that's a,
still fighting for those same rights to govern
yes,
our own bodies and not to be governed by the patriarchy that wants to keep us small or
right.
quiet,
right.
shut up,
Yeah, it's very frightening, starting to lose those reproductive rights again.
yeah.
That's a big conversation.
It is. I'm sorry to bring that up, but I'm just like, whoa, that was in 1964. That's literally 60 years from ago. And that's, we we need a new suffrage movement. You and me, we should.
Yeah, no, it's extremely important to bring it up because we're at such a critical time,
Mm,
and the shift that's happening, it's very frightening, and to go backwards would be detrimental to so much,
yeah,
so much.
yeah, there's,
Men, women, children, everything, everybody, every gender,
yes, thank you.
So,
Sorry to interrupt, but I just wanted to like shine
no,
like
no,
that for a minute. It's like we're talking about history and we're talking about current events. Like you could be saying the same thing with just putting different names. It's the same situation hundreds of years later, really, from the beginning.
absolutely, and it needs to be, everybody needs to get on board with this, like how that would change society if women's reproductive rights were taken.
Right. Exactly. Okay.
Um,
Well, but move on with
so
your stuff and we'll get back to that.
okay, yeah, right. Okay, so 1970 was when nutrition science gave us a lot more information, macronutrients, micronutrients, and we just had a better understanding of what we put in our body mattered. Um, so, um, health, diet culture saw that happening, so grabbed onto the whole health aspect of that. And so it was no longer just about our bodies and our beauty, but then it was also about our health and putting a lot on people as far as the responsibility we have for our health.
Hmm.
And there's pros and cons to that, which is another conversation. But um, so this is when low fat and calorie counting became really popular. And it just made diet culture stronger. So um, in 1982, um, Jane Fonda was the image that we all remember.
Remember,
Very fit.
I lived her lifestyle. I was the one bouncing around with leg warmers and a thong leotard over top of my tights. That was me. Telling
I
those ladies,
Yes,
get thinner, because that was, and that's when I looked like her and I felt, and really more or less looked like that body type. But when I
yes,
looked in the mirror, that is not what I saw at all.
yeah, yes. Which very typical of that happening with people.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, so Jane Fonda was. I also. I mean, I could probably still do the routines. Um, I was way into Jane Fonda and all of her videotapes. But so it was, about fitness,
Right.
be strong, but it was still very lean.
Skinny. Yeah.
Uh-huh, very thin. Um, so then in 1990 came the third wave of feminism, fighting for equality among all women, all genders. Um, and becoming, it was evident that women were gaining more power. So again, the pushback. And this time it was Kate Moss and Naomi Campbell. Very, very thin, sickly skinny. Look like more like, I think this picture of Kate Moss, she looks more like an adolescent boy.
Yeah. Right.
Um, so that was the ideal female body image at that time. And then we moved on to like the 2000s, where it was the Victoria's Secret angel,
Mhm.
very sexy, more curves. And then today I may be a little bit out of the loop because like today I still think of like Kim Kardashian, Beyonce being kind of
Mhm.
that healthy influencer. So, so yeah, it seems like the image has gotten bigger of the female ideal body, but it's still very much about perfection, very much about staying in staying in that mindset. So if we're distracted by what our bodies look like, our beauty, we're not going to do things that have more meaning in our lives.
Hmm.
It's going to be distracting us from bigger and better things in our life.
Really stepping into our power and being empowered as a woman.
Exactly.
And so, wow, I'm interrupting again, but I have so many questions flowing through my brain right now. You obviously, did the work and learned all of this history and stuff like that. So, what I'm wondering, or maybe what I'm hearing, and I want clarification, is so women start to move forward in some type of, empowerment in some way, shape, or form, and then it's the patriarchy that's coming up with this image and using marketing to say, no, this is what women should be focusing on. And then we
Mhm.
buy into that, right?
Right.
And then we follow
Right.
along. And then we're like, okay. And then we kind of, maybe shuts us up for a minute as feminines. Then little by little, we start to step forward. And then another wave of like, oh no, this isn't what women should be doing. This is what women, and marketing, we know marketing is brainwashing. I mean, by now we know that they've already done all of the research for 100 years. They've been doing research how to manipulate people's brains. Like if anybody out there is hearing this and doesn't realize you're being manipulated by marketing and by programming and TV. I mean, the word program was designed because they knew when they were doing it, they were programming you, right? They would say, what program do you want to watch tonight on TV? Like that was a word that was used and still is used because they're programming us. So also though, women are in the cosmetic industry, in the anti-aging cream industry, coming up with diets, if you will, fad diets, I think. I don't think it's all men now. So uh,
Absolutely.
let's talk about that because it's almost like we're creating our own demise, maybe. I don't know. I'm thinking out loud, but it sounds to me like, okay, men were doing this, like, oh, here's the, no, we're going to make you small again. We're going to show these pictures of the ideal woman. So you need to be small and you need to focus on that. So, but then after a while, women are like, yeah, we do need to be small. And I'm going to come up with like Living Well Lady was a fitness thing back east. And I don't even know if it was designed by a woman. They might have just called it that. And maybe a man did create that chain, that brand. I don't
Hmm. Hmm.
so, how is this overlap, and how are we continuing to perpetuate this as women if we knew the history and understood? Wait a minute, this was right. I
Okay.
don't know if that's a question or I don't know. I'm just my mind's blown right now.
Okay. No, no, that's very important because it's like, how did we buy into this shit?
There you
You
go.
know? Um, okay, I'm going to read a quote by a woman, and this will kind of bring us into that whole thing.
Cool.
A woman named Naomi Wolf, who 30 years ago wrote a book called The Beauty Myth. Fascinating book. Um, so this quote is from her. A culture fixated on female thinness is not an obsession about female beauty, but an obsession about female obedience. Dieting is the most potent political sedative in women's history. A quietly mad population is a tractable one. So,
Wow.
in that, how did we buy into it? How did we believe all of this? Well, we're socialized at a very young age. Um, So socialization is a process of internalizing the norm and the ideology of a society. So we're bombarded with, all this marketing, all these images. So we're socialized that to believe that we are our bodies, we are our beauty, and the best thing we can do is be a good girl.
Mm,
Um, and we bought into it because it from very young 5-year-old girls talk about feeling fat, being fat.
mm,
um 8-year-olds dieting. um it's a brainwashing from the time we are born.
mhm,
um Boys are socialized to be strong and unemotional, and girls are socialized, like I said,
mhm.
to be about to be a good girl, to be a people pleaser,
Yeah. And
um, to not stir things up.
right. And I do think that's changing. I mean, I can see that difference
Yeah.
in my children raising my grandchildren, my
Hmm.
daughters raising, strong, independent young lady, my granddaughter, and that the boys, understanding from them to be more, emotionally aware or, empathetic or things along those lines, what are considered
I
feminine.
agree. I agree. It is starting to change, and it's really exciting that it is.
Yeah.
Um,
But those talons of that patriarch are so invisible now. And I used the word insidious earlier, and that's a little bit
yeah.
how I see it. It's like I'm trying to eradicate a particular invasive species from my yard, and it's year after year after year of different seasons going in there, whether I'm torching it or pulling it about the roots, or like
Right.
it's a lot of work, and that's
Right.
one invasive species in my yard, like overpowering the beautiful native lupin, right? So like I look
Mm,
at that as a macro, really, or a micro of what's happening in this conversation with patriarchy versus
yeah. Yeah. And
making
um, yeah, and making the changes. Yeah, and we are seeing, there's more, with all the media, we are seeing diverse bodies more and more.
Mhm,
Um, which is great. The more that we see, then that programming kind of gets diminished and
mhm,
split open. But you look at how strong, on the other side is how strong it still is. The anti-aging, the beauty end industry drives me nuts. That whole, like, we're not supposed to age. That's crazy. Anti-aging, that just really drives me crazy. And I would love to invite people to um, really start being aware of the language we use. Um, when people say, "Oh, she looks great for her age,"
hate
we
that.
have to stop that. We have to stop that.
Yeah.
But so it is there. There's a huge change. I see these young people, stepping away from these patriarchal or dominating ways.
Mhm.
And it's wonderful. It's wonderful to see. But at the same time, it is still very insidious and sneaky, very sneaky. Diet culture is, the whole wellness thing is really diet culture. We have to be very, very careful and aware of how it's coming into our world.
Completely. And that's a little pet peeve of mine because I'm a wellness practitioner and I've built, my whole world around physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual well-being. I use the Native American medicine wheel as my
Mm,
model, right? And making sure that each one of those quadrants is nourished equally, right? So I'm not, you could be as physically fit as you want and look great on the cover of a magazine, but still be an addict in some way, shape, or form, or still be mean, or still have self hate, or not self love. Let's put it that way. That kind of thing, right? So to
Mhm.
have all that. So when I see something in advertisement, wellness, I get all excited. I'm just like, oh, cool, and I'll investigate it. It'll be Botox. It'll be some kind of a facial, to make you look younger. And this is what they're calling
Yes.
wellness. I'm like, that's not wellness.
Right.
I wouldn't have called it diet culture, but in a way, yeah, that's like, no, you're programming still, you're programming. And that, I mean, I've been in business. I've been an entrepreneur my whole life. And I go to those business courses, and that's what they teach you is speak to the person's pain. And who in our country, in our world, doesn't have an insecurity in one way, shape, or form? Of course we do, right? Somehow, some way, someday. So all you have to do is find somebody's insecurity, find your markets
Yeah.
security, and speak to their pain, and then sell them this product, right? Sell them.
Yeah.
It's just to sell the product.
Yes.
The
Yes.
anybody really thinks that there's a company out there, I mean, I'm sure there are some very socially conscious companies, don't get me wrong. In fact, I know some, and I'll do business with them, but the majority are not that way. And all they're looking at you as you're a dollar sign. That's all. You're a
Right.
dollar sign to them. They don't care about you. And they're trying to sell to you. And I loved that part about your business, Regina, where you're doing self coaching. And, it's therefore when I hear self coaching, I maybe not completely correctly, but I think self influencer. We're all out
Mhm.
there looking at not all, many people out there looking at influencers. Oh, so and so says to buy this product, so I'm going to buy this product because this famous person uses it. Like that famous person doesn't care about you. You're a dollar sign to them. And they're influencing you, they're programming you, they're brainwashing you. And I love the part about self coaching to me that says, I'm going to work on me without your outside influence.
Mhm. Yeah, and that's where like your medicine wheel. I mean, that's where in our culture we're so about this physical form, but put that aside and what is left? How do I nurture myself spiritually, mentally, emotionally? How do I nourish others and the planet? Yeah, getting away from the almighty dollar it's it's a tough one.
Yeah. And then money is important for the things that money are important for. We need money to live, for sure. But to just start spending all this money on products because somebody said that, and it's not really. This is the way I know that the anything physical, my body, your body, the land outside, any tree, when you're looking at it, if it's healthy, that's anything that we can see is really the data. That's all we're seeing is the data of what's going on beneath the surface. So if
Mhm.
we're taking care of ourselves spiritually, mentally, emotionally, then physically we're going to look vibrant and healthy. You can't not,
Mhm.
right? It can't not.
Mhm.
Any tree, if it's healthy, then the roots are in good soil, right? If a tree, so
Right.
that's the data. It doesn't come from the outside on. You can put all the lotion you want on your face and eat all the diet pills you want. If inside you're not spiritually well and mentally well and emotionally balanced, then it's not going to work anyways.
Right. Right. And I think that's really um the important thing here is putting we all like to feel good and look our best or feel pretty, handsome, whatever. But putting it into perspective. Like, we've blown this up so much, just like, the way we've blown sex up. It's like it's this huge thing. In reality, it's this much of who we are, you
Mm,
know. Um, so it's reining that in and just understanding how, we're socialized to all of this, and then we take that and internalize it. Um, And that's where we have to really be aware, because that internalization happens at very vulnerable age, in teen years and young adulthood, because then we see what we were socialized in, we see that as truth. Um, and that's where we have to start being really aware and questioning that. Is that true? you know,
It's
um,
a great question to ask.
is that reality?
Yeah. Wow. So where did we leave off on your history, on your timeline of history?
Um, well, that was
That
pretty
brings
much it. It's up
to,
to, yes, up to, the point of, today being the influencer, everybody kind of watching what other people are doing, like you said, taking advice from these, I use this product, um and therefore it's going to make me a better person. I'm going to fix this brokenness that I feel.
yeah, yeah, how the marketers speak to our pain, right?
Hmm.
Right.
Hmm.
Or insecurity or whatever the heck, and then capitalize on it, even though the product, you know, may or may not work because you're not working from the inside out, which is what we should all be doing.
Right.
I was sharing that with somebody who, a friend of mine, really, and she was just like, "That sounds like a lot of work, Sharon." Like telling her how I live my life, to be balanced and healthy and whole and happy and secure and comfortable with who I am. I can walk into a room of anybody, any kind of, and be really comfortable and like legit be myself.
Mhm.
I don't have to shape shift when I'm over with this group and be like this when I'm over with this group and act like that one. You know what I mean? Like we can be our authentic being. Hopefully, anywhere you go in the world, it shouldn't matter, right? Uh,
Right.
and so she says to me, "That sounds like a lot of work, Sharon." And I was just like, pick your heart, because I watch this person in constant conflict and, all the products and a bazillion pair of shoes because this shoe is so and so and they're more expensive than the last pair. And that's the thing that's going to make me happy. And I'm just like,
Right.
to me, that sounds like a lot of work. I'd rather
Right.
sit in the contemplate or self-reflect for a couple minutes, a couple times a day and get good with myself. And then none of that matters. I can have the cheapest shoes in the gym and I don't care. And I do.
Right.
And I don't care. I'm like, you know, so it's kind of
Well,
interesting.
and things are happening so fast right now. We're in this vulnerable time of this shift happening, and whichever way it goes. Um, so, we're just, we're bombarded with so much
Hmm.
that it is important for us to self-reflect, and not get caught up in so much of what's happening out there, grounding ourselves, and because it all starts with us. That's what you were saying.
Yeah,
It all starts within us. um so yeah, we're in a very vulnerable time right now. And
we really are. And as women, I think we're in a very empowering time, really, despite
mm,
patriarchy keeping on coming in, and trying to squash any bit of, feminine qualities, even if it's not from a woman, right? So, listening
mhm.
to this TED talk the other day, and I've listened to it quite a few times. And I sat with my husband last night. And I was like, "You need to listen to this." Not let he needs to because he's on board, but just like someone just so I could have conversation with, like I'm having conversation with you about the same guy. And his name is John Gers. I'm not even sure if I'm saying his name correctly, but Gerzama, I think it is. And he did this TED talk on a book that he wrote called The Athena Doctrine: How Women and Men Who Think Like Them Will Rule the Future. And he wrote this book based on this research that he did. He went to 64 different countries. He interviewed, I'm sorry, 13 different countries, interviewed 64,000 people, adult men, adult women, and millennials. So from around the world, 64,000 people, surveying them, interviewing them on all masculine versus feminine, not necessarily people so much as the qualities. So with half of the group
Mm,
he did, he took half
mhm.
the group and he said, write down in three list: masculine, feminine, neutral. just qualities in a leader, whatever qualities. Would you consider that a masculine quality? Would you consider it a feminine, or that it would span both, that it's neutral, right? So they did, and they came up with their list of words. He did that with half of the people. With the other half, he listed the feminine and the quality. He says circle feminine, all the different qualities, circle feminine. So people, he was seeing that there was a commonality all around the world, with pretty much everybody agreeing nurturing is a feminine quality, without them saying what is nurturing, feminine, masculine, right? And some they did, and others they didn't. They said, what's a feminine quality? They said nurturing, right? So somehow we all think of certain qualities as feminine and certain qualities as masculine, no matter where we live in the world. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So it was interesting, right? So he's like, whoa, everybody has kind of the same definition of what a masculine quality is and what a female quality is. And I'm not saying that they have to come from a woman or that they have to come from a man, because obviously men can be nurturing as well, women can be aggressive. So it's not so much that it's coming in the form of a female body or the form of a male body or a transgender or any, on the spectrum body, just these qualities, right? So one of the questions they said, they put out a statement, and they said, and asked all 64,000 people around the world, the world would be a better place if men thought more like women, and they had to agree or disagree. 66% of adults around the world agreed. 63% of men agreed. And 65% of millennials agreed that the world would be a better place if men thought more like women. And I just thought that was really, really interesting. One of his people who he interviewed was a female defense secretary, not in this country, in a different country. And she's highly successful and respected by all. And he interviewed her and said, what is it with your defense decisions? What is your lenses? How do you make your decisions? And she says, I make my decisions like a mom.
Mm,
Like a mom, like a mom
nice.
would make decisions in her household with her children when there's a conflict. That's what she said. And so in the end, I looked at his chart and I wrote down some of what was considered feminine leadership qualities. And here's what the list was, the things that all these people around the world came up with. Feminine leadership qualities: plans for the future, expressive, flexible, patient, empathetic, intuitive, collaborative, reasonable, selfless, passionate, and loyal. That's what they considered feminine leadership qualities. For masculine leadership qualities, there was but three: analytical, decisive, and resilient was in both columns. Resilient was a male, considered by these people who they surveyed, both male and a female quality for leadership. But those same patterns, when they surveyed for other things, were also the same patterns that they discovered that people said is not just leadership, but for morality and also for happiness,
Mm,
right?
interesting.
For happiness, plan for the future. For happiness, be expressive. For happiness, be patient, empathetic, intuitive, collaborative, reasonable, selfless, passionate, and loyal. For happiness. Like that's a big thing that I
Yeah,
see people develop authentic happiness. And I'm not talking about skipping around town, woo, 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 like that
right.
kind of happiness. I'm just talking about general, within a range, overall, just have a sense of happiness in your heart. And very few people in our world can genuinely say that. And that's sad
Right.
to me. Like I could literally cry right now, Regina. Like that there's not that many really happy people. There's
Yeah.
a few people that I want to hang around with, because I'm like, man, you people are heavy. You're always in a conflict. You're talking about some kind of drama. You got all this crap in your life. Like, how are you not developing your plans for the future, your expressiveness so that you can be happy, your flexibility to accept a range of things, even though it might be uncomfortable? It's just so sad to me. And this part,
Yeah.
the intuitive nature that women have, that we have been, like, I'm sure without knowing, I can know that there have been women all since the beginning of time that were looking at those marketing things saying, intuitively, I don't feel that's true.
Mhm.
Inside, I don't agree, but then,
Right.
we get brainwashed or whatever, or you're the weirdo because you don't wear makeup. Like, that
Right.
girl in high school that didn't buy into it and she was the weirdo. Or,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Where she was really, a young suffrage person, really, when you think about
Right. Right.
it, right? And just not
Yeah.
immunity for that. And men aren't taught to be intuitive. I think everybody
Right.
has intuition, but why
Right.
that's not something where we'll condition little girls, rock the baby, play with the dolly, be nice, be gentle. And whereas with boys, listen to your intuition. What does your gut say? What is the right thing to do here? Da 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 da. However you would do that with a child.
Right. Well, that nurturing, I think that, we know we're all born with the yin and yang. We're all born with the male and female within us.
Yes.
And I think boys, having raised two boys, my oldest son was endlessly teased for crying, for being too sensitive. And that really started making me look at patriarchy and the domination system and how it affects our boys and men. And it's very sad. I mean, the nurturing, we're all as human beings are nurturers, but that kind of quality is bullied and beaten out of our boys.
Hmm.
Um, so how do we, tap into that male and female balance? How do we balance that within ourselves?
Right.
And I feel like, I was listening to this woman, Maya Luna, and she describes the feminine so beautifully. Um, and she says that, it's about receiving, but in a way like, she said it's savoring the senses. The feminine is savoring the senses. And
Hmm.
I love that, like really feeling, um, tasting, hearing, seeing, like really dropping into our senses is the feminine, which we all can do, right? Um, so I think learning, like I'm really learning what feminine and masculine mean to me. And because we're so programmed and conditioned in a dominating system, it's really difficult. I mean, it's so ingrained that I think I get one aspect of it and I'm like, oh my God, that's, it's not. Um, or I don't understand it, because so for myself, that's the work I'm doing right now is just really pulling that apart. And the qualities of masculine and feminine, of course, are so that's what creates our experience as human beings
Hmm. Yeah,
is
and it's important
both of
to have
those.
them. Yes, exactly. It's important to have both. And we are neurobiologically, men and women really are wired differently, and rightly so. I mean, really, the brain research is done. They do this. They pick apart and all of thank goodness nowadays for all of this neurobiology and neuroscience and understanding neuroplasticity that we can change our brains, even though we've thought this for a long time. But we are wired differently, and rightly so. I think it's perfect that we are. Obviously, nature is perfect. It did
Yes.
that. But at the same time, we don't have to set up camp all the way. I'm thinking of the bell curve, right? We don't have to set up camp all the way over here with this outlier of masculinity and this outlier of femininity, but we can meet in the middle at that bell curve. And women, it's important for us to be assertive in a lot of ways.
Yes.
And a lot
Yes.
of times when we do finally make it to, higher CEO positions in big corporations or whatever, we've been conditioned, some of us as women, that when we get there, we start to act like a man. And I'm sorry to say it, man, female. And I know that's not completely 100%. So I hope our viewers and listeners can understand, the more masculine quality. So they've had to maybe overdevelop a masculine quality to where they might seem come across aggressive or a bi, you'll hear people say, oh, she's such a b, I'm like,
Mhm.
whereas if a man acted this way or a masculine person acted that way, that would be acceptable because, well, he's a guy or whatever, we hear that,
Right.
even though we're still understanding there's a spectrum of gender. Um, but bringing in those qualities, right? So women need to be more assertive sometimes, but yet we don't have to be aggressive. And men need to have that as well, but it doesn't have to be as aggressive, right?
Mhm.
That's how we can
Mhm.
get into range, so
Right.
into a little more balance, within all of us. So for, somebody who has a very strong, aggressive male quality, regardless of the gender you identify as, you know, like you said, reflect, pick it apart, right? Pick that
Mhm.
apart. Let me
Mhm.
reflect on that and see, like, am I a little too aggressive? People used to tell me I was aggressive, and then aggressively I would say, I'm assertive. And I'm like, oh, that sounded really aggressive. I'm aggressive. Since I had to reel that in a little bit. Yeah, so that's to me, that's the fun work because you know why? That I have control over. If I'm out
Right.
trying to change the world, I understand it needs to be done, but the best way for each one for the world to change is for each one of us to come to balance within, and therefore we will be balanced individuals as mothers, as coworkers, as coaches, as whatever our role.
Absolutely. And then we bring that to our children, the healing that we do is for the next generation,
Mhm. 7 generations to our grand,
7
to the ones
generations.
that aren't even born yet. That
Yeah.
is, and that's what's sad, I think, in our culture. We're pretty short-sighted, even though everybody's anti-aging and we don't want to die, even though dying is part of living. That's all, we're so short-sighted. We're looking at, well, what am I going to live to be 80, 90? And we're short-sighted, not thinking about what you're leaving, the legacy you're leaving behind of, you know, patriarchy, domination, regardless of your gender orientation or identity. Um, all of the pollution that we're leaving. I'm going to dump these chemicals in the ocean because guess what? I'm not going to be here in 10 years. You know,
Yeah.
I have my pet peeves about balloons. And my daughter's like, we're
Uh-huh.
having a balloon fight. I'm like, I will buy you reusable balloons. Like, stop it. Oh, mom, it's just balloons. And I'm like, well, you know what? I'm off this planet in a couple, whatever, sooner than you. So that's the world you want to leave your children. That's what you want to leave for your grandchildren. Dolphins choking on balloon bits. Like, that's your business then. Like, sad, but okay. Like just that
Yeah.
short-sightedness, and that you know, feeling of uh I don't know, conquering, just that conquering
Yeah.
masculinity, whether no matter the body you're in. Let me
Yeah.
conquer that instead of working with.
Right. Yeah, and that reminded me of how I was listening. There's a woman that I listen to. Her name is Woman Stand Shining, her Pat McCabe, and she works with with younger kids. And she said that this is kind of going back to what we were talking about um, with people being happy and content and that kind of thing. And she said, we've lost sight of life being a gift. And, a lot of our children, the children that she works with, don't want to be here because they live in, there's such uncertainty and that kind of thing. And that we're supposed to be here. I remember her saying that, human beings are supposed to be here. And we just have to remember how life is a gift. Um, and so to leave that, like you're saying, to leave this better world so that our children can understand that it is a gift and that they are welcomed here and enjoy being here and experiencing being a human on this planet.
Yeah. And hopefully a balanced human, you know, for each
Mhm.
one of us to balance our masculinity with our femininity, like you said, the yin and the yang. That is such a perfect image, or the medicine wheel. Like every culture has a symbol
Yes.
of wholeness, right? The whole is greater than the sum of its parts. So if we're walking around like I'm so masculine, or I'm so aggressive, and I'm, da, 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 that's 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 off balance. It's just off balance, and it's unfortunate that we don't get taught that early on, and like we have to stumble through it. Like I came to learning the medicine wheel and using it as a model for my life and a model for my business, in everything that I do, even my meal planning. Making sure I'm having
Mm,
balance of everything. Not too much of
mhm,
any one area. Even a thought, I won't hold a thought completely. It's like no, everything
mm.
balanced out. But that came from me being physically fit but not mentally well, still an addict. It came from me not dealing with my childhood traumas. And so then I started to deal with that. I was like, okay, my mental health is really important. And then it came from me from reflecting on the not so positive parts of Catholicism that affected my life adversely. And so I had
Yes.
that, and talk about patriarchy. So yeah, and it's just like, so I eventually came to it over decades of continual. Now I'm working on past lives, so don't even get me started on that stuff. Not enough just to heal this life, you have to heal your past life. Not everybody. That's just me, that's my journey. But yeah, but it's over all of this, confusion and trauma and inner discordance, that I
Yes.
had eventually came to it. But how great if I was raised with that, like, please, that would have been so terrific. Because somebody said, no, Sharon, you should have balance and harmony in your life, and here's how, and here's legit, this is how, this is the how to,
Yeah.
you know so I've come to develop that and teach that, and it works for those that want to do the work. But most people want to take that pill or eat that thing or take that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that was
Yeah.
marketed to them because that marketer spoke to their pain, and they'll shell out all this money,
Right.
drive that car, or whatever the heck it is, to buy all those fancy sneakers or shoes or outfits or whatever the heck. It's
Absolutely. I recently heard, speaking of balance, I recently heard, since I said the word patriarchy so much, that patriarchy is an imbalance of the female, the deep feminine within men. And I thought that was pretty interesting.
yeah.
Um, so it's all about that balance.
As well, I wonder if fem, feminism. Am I saying that correctly?
Uh-huh.
Doesn't sound.
Feminism, yeah.
Thank you. I couldn't hardly say it. That's weird. Um, I'll reflect on that later for sure. Because that's how I am. I wonder if that's an imbalance as well. My husband and I had a little bit of a conversation. It got a little bit heated, and I did. He was just, he called me a feminist. He's like, you need to check your feminism. And I was like, I will. Like, it really did. And we have a very healthy relationship. And I mean, he said it in a nice way, but it was heated, and both of our energies was up. And I was just like, I hear that. Okay. And I will. And I have been. And also I said, you need to check your male privilege also.
Mhm,
So,
mhm.
it's even being conscious and aware and being in a loving, supportive relationship where I can have these conversations. It's ongoing. The work is ongoing
Yeah,
because
yeah,
it's insidious. It'll come in with the next advertisement or the next product on the market, or the next conversation I have with somebody telling me about some fad thing they're doing, and I'm shaking my head like, oh my gosh, just go inward and work there.
yeah,
Then none of that matters. Then none of the external really matters, and it's easier to navigate it. I find for myself.
absolutely.
Whew, I'm taking a deep breath right now. That was terrific. Well, there might be some people that will have questions after they listen to this, and I want them to know how they can get in touch with you, Regina. I want to thank you so much for being here and sharing your
Oh, thank
wisdom.
you.
Yeah, it's good
I
stuff.
I love talking about it, so thank you for having me.
Mm,
My I don't have a website at this point, but my email is a good way of getting a hold of me, and that's RM as in Marie, R excuse me, RM Hill, HILL 0203 at gmail.com.
perfect. All
Yeah.
right, great. Well, thank you so much for spending time with me. And I just love our conversations. Even when we meet up in town, I feel like I wish she was in
Yeah.
person to just sit down and have like some really deep conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. I
They're
would
amazing.
love that.
One of those soulful people who I enjoy connecting with. They're
Oh, and I
not.
feel the same about you.
So thank you. Many blessings
Thank
to you,
you.
lady. Have a
Thank you. Have a wonderful day.
you as well.
Bye bye.
Bye. Hey, thanks for visiting my YouTube channel. If you liked this video, hit the like button. If you want more like it, subscribe. Thanks. Have a great day.